we are recording, thank you, Leah, and I'm going to turn it over to Chip for our land acknowledgement.
Thanks, Simon. We're going to start this meeting as we always do with our Indigenous land acknowledgement. It's now also available on our chapter website. Specifically in this DFW area, we're standing and living on the land stolen from the Kickapoo, Wichita, Tawakoni, Jumanos, and Comanche people who've been harmed yet continue to thrive in the process or despite the process of colonization and white supremacy. So I encourage all of us to go to native-land.ca and educate ourselves on these Native communities.
Thank you, Chip.
You're welcome, Simon.
We're now going to go into community building and our breakout rooms. So let's turn it over to Leah.
Hi, everybody. So as we started last month, so this month will continue as well. So what we will do is to put you guys into breakout rooms for 12 to 15 minutes and just, to catch up with each other, tell each other your names. I actually have a community guideline to share today. So give me 1 second. Let me find my PowerPoint window. Okay. So since today we're going to talk about DEIJ and environmental justice a little bit, and these issues can be a little bit sticky and tricky to talk about. So I want to go through first the community guidelines before we put you guys into breakout groups. So the first thing, make space or take space. Speak from the I perspective and your own experiences instead of generalizing. Seek to understand and practice active listening and be open to productive discomfort, but sometimes productive can be different looking for each of us. So be open to discomfort. Assume good intentions. Intent does not negate impact. Disagree with the score without discord. And lastly, accept that there is no quick fix. So these are the community guidelines that we can try to memorize and remind ourselves in the breakout groups. So for today, the breakout groups, as usual, share your name, share one thing exciting that you did in the past week, or maybe in the next, 7 days or so. The second thing, since today we're gonna go into diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, if you guys have time, I would love for you guys to think about, your definition. How do you understand these terms, right? Can you give your definition of each of these terms? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And what they might look like in your communities, maybe families, maybe friend circle, and your organization, any part of group that you're a part of. Okay, sounds good. All right, so these are the things, and I will also again put them into the chat. And Simon, you can put people into breakout groups whenever you're ready.
Stand by for breakout rooms. All right, it looks like we are all 5 in this breakout room. Yes, I can reorganize my stuff here. Okay. Am I the only one in the breakout room?
Hey, Simon. Sorry, I'm off the call.
No worries, Brittany.
Yeah, I just had a call that I had to answer real quick. Okay, well, do you want to do this?
Yeah, I think we're actually just in the original meeting room, but yeah, sure.
Okay. Cool. All right, so what is one exciting thing that you've done this week? Do you want to go first, or I can go first?
Let's let you go first. I really don't have anything like related to climate. Having health insurance again, I went to the dentist for the first time in 7 to 9 years, and that was not a fun experience.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that doesn't sound fun or exciting.
Oh, it was exciting. It was very exciting, but not in the way that I would actually like.
Okay, yeah, so just not the fun part.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, so climate related. So I actually run the sustainability interest group for my company. So I started that probably, well, a few months ago, but I had been giving presentations for, 6+ months. So we had a committee meeting this week, and actually for the month of July, I'm hoping to see if we can get Jane, who presented at our chapter meeting last month, to come present to my company. So that's one thing I'm working on right now. So that'll be cool.
Very nice.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
All right. So do we want to work on the definitions here?
Yeah. Looks like Paula just joined us. Hi, Paula. Do you want to share something you've done in the last week? Something exciting? If you do, you are muted.
Oh, we just got a message from James in the
yeah.
chat. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go ahead through our definitions then.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't really consider myself any kind of expert or anything on these, topics. So I guess, but to me, I would see diversity as just various perspectives and backgrounds, and experiences, life experiences.
I definitely agree. I think one of the main things about diversity is really just trying to get people with different backgrounds into the same room on the same level, so they can all have equal voice. Which
Yes.
which I guess goes into inclusion, definitely.
And and the equity piece too, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I encounter this like frequently. Right now I'm doing a lot of research projects, and I keep finding issues with the way that the US is very obsessed with like any kind of research that's conducted in English or that's only normalized on predominantly American or Western or European immigrant populations.
Wait, what do you mean by the populations piece?
Okay, so for example, a lot of the measures that are used in psychological research, the participants who are used to validate those measures were all like middle class and white. Like
males.
Yeah, frequently
Yeah.
males. Yeah, this is an issue that goes all the way back to the early 1900s when the Binet test came out, the intelligence test.
Yeah, I feel I have heard that come up before, particularly just this idea that a lot of research is done just using like men in the population, like as the the population in the sample for testing. And so then when for example, I think a good kind of example of that is like a lot of medical research too, right? Like I think the most common one that we can think of is like symptoms of a heart attack, right, which are very different for men versus women. So
yes, and that even like there's so much racial issues in there too. I read recently about a Black medical doctor who was reading over a textbook and looking at all of these symptoms like skin discoloration.
Oh, sure.
And he's like, well, what would this look like on somebody who looks like me? And he came out with an entire book
Yeah.
to explain like everything that was going on. Hey Paula, the discussion, we're looking at the definition of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and what they look like in our communities and organizations.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, Paula.
Hi. Sorry, I was juggling multiple audio settings from switching between headphones, and so didn't get off mute because I was trying to figure out which speaker I was using.
No worries. I've been there recently.
So yeah, did we want to move on to equity then? Because I think this one, like there's an image that I've seen that I think is, and I'm sure you guys have seen this too, or you all have seen this. See, even me, I'm trying to be better about my speech too. So coming from the Midwest, guys, like you guys, that's what we say that all the time, right? But I've been trying to move away from that term to a more like gender neutral language. So even that is something, you know, around like diversity inclusion.
Yeah, English makes it hard sometimes.
Yeah. But yeah, so like that picture, I don't know if you all have seen that, you know, where equality is giving like the same, so it's like picking an apple from a tree, and like equality is giving the same kind of ladder, but equity is giving, you know, somebody who needs a taller ladder, that taller ladder. I guess that's like the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of that term.
Definitely, I do remember seeing that. Yeah, the idea that maybe everyone doesn't need the same thing, but everybody needs something different to be at the same level.
Exactly.
James
So
is
then
recommending.
did we want to move on to the inclusion?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this one I think is, so I've taken some classes through my workplace around like belonging and inclusion. And I think it's really, yeah, like fostering that sense of making sure everybody is heard. Making sure everyone's they're heard, and that they have a place at the table, and building that kind of sense of trust and, you know, feeling of comfort, and being part of the group is what I think of when I think of inclusion.
Definitely. And speaking of inclusion, welcome Alex. Everybody's been pushed into breakout rooms for discussing diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. The breakout rooms are going to wrap up in a few minutes, so I won't push you into one, but you're welcome to join our discussion.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, sorry I'm late. You can stick me wherever.
It's no worries.
You're stuck with us.
Yeah, I'm new to managing breakout rooms in Zoom, so this is a little bit challenging at times.
You're doing great.
Thank you. I think I just sent a message to everybody. They'll be closing breakout rooms in a couple of minutes here. So yeah, so justice. I mean, for me, like in work, I've been going kind of out of my way trying to find other populations that have contributed to studies. Actually, a really big issue. So in America, I think the default is that like European descendants in America kind of speak English, and that is probably it. So there's an issue again in academics where people are actually pulling research from other languages like Spanish or whatever, and they'll translate it into English and then present it as their own research.
What?
And they get away with it because there are so few people who are multilingual who are actually looking at these other journals.
Oh, wow.
It's a pretty big mess.
Yeah, that's not fair at all. like, not to to not credit to the original researcher.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another issue with the publish or perish kind of environment.
Yeah, okay, so that sounds like there may be some issues in terms of like incentives.
Yes. Okay, so I think we're about at time to come back to the main room, so I'm gonna try to invite everybody back.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. There's a 1-minute warning. Ah. The
Thanks
interfa-
for facilitating today too, by the way.
No problem. Thank you for being patient. The interface for controlling breakout rooms is a lot different from the interface of being in a breakout room.
Oh, hey, did we have anything from the creatives group today, or is it or
That's
maybe
next.
that's going to be after?
Yeah, that's coming up next.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. All right, people are slowly coming back. Got another 20 seconds and all rooms will be closed. Half our group is back. All right, it looks like we're back. See roughly the right number of participants back. So welcome back, everybody. Hopefully that was a productive 10 minutes of discussion. We're going to go on now to our Creative Space working group. We have a video featuring Elena Vaquera. It was filmed by our amazing videographer, Z. And it's about why we need environmental justice right now versus by 2030 or 2050, as some of these programs are ridiculously suggesting. And let's see if I can successfully do that. Okay, can everybody see this partially loaded YouTube video?
I can see the partially loaded YouTube video.
All right, great. Let's see if you can hear it.
On the days where the pesticides would be distributed across the fields, the air would always smell a little funky, and my dad would be like, "Oh, that's just the airplane. There's nothing to worry about." I grew up in a border city in South Texas. In high school, there would be a lot of pesticides that would be dumped that we would smell on our way to the high school or to our schools. And we would just say like, "Oh, they're dumping their pesticides today," not really understanding how that could be linked to the increasing number of inhalers in our communities, or how the factories that were located in different areas impacted the quality of water that was located there. And it wasn't until I was able to talk to different individuals here at my university that I understood just how impacted or how affected that my community was when it came to environmental issues. I asked myself why my community wasn't talking about it if it was so evidently impacting our daily lives. And it's hard to talk about something that is silently hurting you when there are things that are visibly hurting you at this moment, when it's hard to put food on the table. Our families are being relocated because these infrastructures that we didn't vote for are coming into our communities. We're not able to go to City Hall because it's 15-20 minutes away from where we live. And those 15-20 minutes of gas would be needed to make sure we were able to go to work the next day. And it's hard when you're living in food deserts and have to decide whether or not you're able to go to a City Hall meeting or make it to the grocery store, when you would only be able to make it once or twice a month. And it's also hard to advocate and want to make yourself visible when you live in mixed status households where your parents may be undocumented, but you have citizenship, or your You may have DACA or TPS or something, but someone else in your family may not. It gets increasingly difficult when you start layering all these different injustices and challenges to a household and to a community to advocate for change. There's so many different injustices that are happening in these communities that it makes it hard to add on care about the environment. It's hard to add on to that because it becomes suffocating just how many challenges there are for these communities. For climate leaders, something I would urge for them to do is keep that in mind. Keep in mind the intersectionality between the environment and health, the environment and workers' rights. Because at the end of the day, what my family is focused on is not about what's going to hurt us in 2030, in 2050. It's what's affecting us today. It's what's going to affect them tomorrow, not 10 years from now.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Talk and Slam series.
Okay. Let's see. Now, real quick, we have a representative from Environment Texas. Luke, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Excellent. So Luke is filling in for another member of his organization who is going to come and talk to us today. So we're going to go ahead and let him present his information. It'll be about 10 minutes, and then we will go on to our primary programming for the rest of the meeting. Luke, if you would.
Great, thanks, and howdy, y'all. So I'm Luke Metzger. I'm the Executive Director of Environment Texas. We're a nonprofit advocate for clean air, clean water, open spaces, and a livable climate. We're based in Austin and do a lot of work at the state legislature, but also some work at the local and federal level. And I wanted to talk to you today about our campaign for 100% renewable energy. We know that getting off of fossil fuels and switching to 100% renewable energy is probably the single most important thing we can do to tackle climate change. And we know that we have the technology to achieve that goal. You know, we're at about 25% renewable energy here in Texas, and the projections for new wind and solar are just off the charts. I remember in 2008, calling for adding about 4,000 megawatts of more solar by 2020. And we hit that goal, which was exciting. I just yesterday saw what some of the solar developers have planned, what's in what's called the ERCOT interconnection queue. And they're planning more than 90,000 megawatts of new solar in just the next few years, another 33,000 megawatts of battery storage, another huge amount of wind power. So we have the resource. What we need is the political will. Of course, after Winter Storm Uri, Greg Abbott and others attacked wind and solar falsely, claiming that they were to blame for the blackouts, when of course we know that failures in natural gas infrastructure were predominantly to blame. And so this past legislative session, you know, we fought off attacks on renewable energy. And we've really just been on the defense for a number of months now. And we decided to go on offense and start to build the political will and demonstrate to Texans that 100% renewable energy is possible. It's more important than ever. And you know, we need to act on it right away. And we have the tools available to us to achieve such a bold goal. And so we're doing a few things to start to build support for that. There was a poll done just after Winter Storm Uri asking Texans, you know, what energy choices that they prefer. And they were asked what should be the number one goal of Texas energy policy. And 56% of Texans said moving towards 100% clean energy. So Texans are with us. Texans are all about this and want to move towards clean energy. What we're missing really is the elite support and amplification of that vision. It's hard to find anyone that's willing to go out there, you know, at the Texas legislature or elsewhere and say, yes, I want 100% clean energy. Because there's a lot of people that feel like, oh, you'll be laughed out of the room, you'll be mocked, if you go and talk to a lawmaker about such a thing. And we need to change that. We need to make it, to demonstrate to the public and to decision makers that not only are the general public strongly supportive, but we also have the academics behind us that we have the energy experts, we have business leaders and others who all agree that this is possible and we must move towards it, and it'll have huge benefits to our state in terms of not only staving off climate change, but in terms of cleaner air and water and economic development and other things. So we reached out to y'all originally about our Voices for Clean Energy, 100% renewable energy project. And this is something that we've done, my organization has done nationally as well as in California. And the basic idea is just to, identify prominent Texans and get them to speak out and endorse the idea of 100% renewable energy. I'll put a link in the chat to give you an idea of kind of what I'm talking about, but just at a very simple level, and this is just one small tactic, but to give you an idea, is just creating a website that puts names and faces and statements on the record saying, yes, we endorse this idea, we think it's plausible, credible, and necessary. And that's just one small step we can do to just start to win the dialogue, win the narrative on these issues, stop being on the defense all the time and start pushing for the offense. So yeah, we're inviting, we're looking for folks to join our Voices for 100% Renewable Energy project, particularly community leaders and business leaders and academics and others. And so if you're interested, I think we've sent y'all the form. I'll have to follow up if we haven't, but about how to get involved. But if not, just email me. My email is luke@environmenttexas.org. And that's one way, we can just start to make the case for this. To give you some other things that we're working on, we also have a webinar coming up on July 29th at 11 a.m. And I'll put the link to RSVP for that also in the chat. But that'll be, again, making the case for 100% renewable energy. We have one of our national folks, Emma Searson, who's the director of our 100% renewable energy campaign, who will present a new report we wrote called We Have the Power, that reviews all the scientific literature demonstrating that 100% renewable energy is possible, with today's technology. So she'll be speaking. We also have Professor Dan Cohen of Rice University speaking, and then Rob Thorelgeld, who's the Global Sustainability Manager for General Motors, which is committed to 100% renewable energy as well, and then maybe some other speakers. But we'll be using that again to just start making the case that this is possible. We're also not just working to kind of win the narrative, but we're also working to win concrete policies to move us towards 100% renewable energy, including, working to get a long 10-year extension of tax credits for wind, solar, battery storage in the federal infrastructure package. We also are working to get cities to adopt programs to bulk purchase renewable energy on behalf of residents, as well as working to get universities and other institutions to commit to 100% renewable energy goals. So a lot of great opportunities, and every bit of renewable energy, that every more megawatt we get installed in Texas, helps remove carbon from the atmosphere, and further moves us towards that 100% goal, and makes it easier. It took us 20 years to get to 25% renewables, but I think President Biden has called for 100% renewables or clean energy by 2035. And I think, given the explosive growth of the industry, that goal is entirely possible. And so we can do a lot here in Texas to expedite it and build the political will and win the contracts to move us towards that future. So thank you all for the opportunity to speak, and thanks for all the work that you do.
Thank you, Luke, for joining us. I believe Roger is going to give us some context.
Yeah, Luke, great to have you with us. I just wanted to say to everyone in the chapter that Leah, Simon, and I met earlier this week with Luke. building a collaboration with Environment Texas has been on my, excuse me, my list of goals for some time. It's a terrific organization. Their goals and our goals are often completely in sync, but they've got a research arm, particularly here in the state of Texas, that I think we can benefit from tremendously. So we're going to be working on a much closer relationship with them. And I'm hoping that the other Texas chapters in our coalition will be joining in that effort. So Luke, delighted to have you here. Thanks so much. And we're looking forward to working with you going forward.
Wonderful. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Simon. And thank you all. And enjoy the rest of your meeting, and to look forward to working together. Take care.
Thank you, Luke. All right, now we'll move on to our environmental justice portion. Our guest speaker today is Dr. Myrtle Bell. She's the Associate Dean of Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion at UT Arlington. We are very excited to have her. Leah is going to be moderating questions that we collected previously. Dr. Bell, welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I appreciate your talking about my diversity background, because I really don't know much about environmental justice, but I believe in it. And I was telling Leah that I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in Cancer Alley. And my husband grew up in Houston, Texas in Cancer Alley. And these are segregated areas that Black people were forced to live in. And I am a somewhat privileged Black person because my family's well educated, and we were able to escape Baton Rouge basically, but I know a lot about it, and I've smelled a lot of that pollution, and I can smell it now in my mind. And so I appreciate the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Myrtle. Like everybody, I just want to say I'm so excited to have my colleague here, because Myrtle is such a, social justice and racial justice warrior. Like sometimes you'll just send me articles and stories about DEIJ conversations and research on that. So welcome, Myrtle. First question for you. So can you talk a little bit more about your work at UT Arlington and what, diversity courses really look like in higher education settings?
Just a minute, I have to write. Okay. At UTA, we are really fortunate to have a climate where you can teach diversity with little backlash. And I say little, I don't say without any, but with little. And so at UTA, I have been teaching diversity formally since about 2000. In 1996 is when I joined the faculty there, and I was there and 2 white women were on faculty, and one of them sort of had a mental breakdown. And it's very easy to have a mental breakdown if you're underrepresented in academia or any space, actually. And she was teaching women in management, and they asked me would I teach it. And it was like, will you teach it tomorrow? And so I began teaching women in management, and I morphed that into diversity because diversity is bigger than women. And so I started teaching that in about 2000, and then the course became a diversity course in 2003, 2004. And it's an elective, and there was a course every other year, then it was every year, then it was twice a year. And now the course that I designed is taught 5 or 6 times a year. And that's because the students want this content. So we're fortunate at UTA to be a very diverse university, and the students want the content. And so it's a mandatory course in public health. It's mandatory in the disability studies minor. We have a disability studies minor, which is one of the first it's the first in Texas and one of 4 or 5 in the nation. And so the course is really popular. It looks at diversity in race and sex and sexual orientation and ability status and age and lots of different areas. So students get a lot of material in that way. So that's what it looks like at UTA. It's an elective course. It's mandatory in the human resources graduate program, but it's still elective for the undergraduates. But lots of exposure to a lot of diverse content and diversity. It talks a lot about the past, and we hear a lot in the news where people don't want us to talk about the past. Well, if you've probably all heard that if we don't talk about it, we're doomed to repeat it. And lo and behold, we're repeating a lot of the things even today. But it talks about the past, it talks about legislation, it talks about things that happen in organizations to people related to their otherness. It talks about privilege. And, when we think about privilege, people get their hackles up, but we all have privilege, right? So I am Black, female, 60 years old with a chronic illness. I still have privilege. I'm Christian in the United States. I'm straight. I'm cisgender. I got a lot of privilege. I got educational privilege. So if we can just own our privilege instead of being angry and denying our privilege, we're way ahead of the game, right? We're way ahead of it. And so I don't have race privilege, but I have some other, and some people with race privilege, then they don't have age privilege, or they don't have ability privilege, or they don't have sexual orientation privilege. And so we can own that, and we can use that, I believe, for good. It talks about privilege. It talks about the legislation. It talks about newly passed laws and things that are going on in organizations like universities, like corporations, like nonprofits, like hospitals, you name it. And so it's a broad course. Now, for other universities, what does it look like in higher ed? I have lots of professional colleagues who teach diversity at different universities around the nation. And it really depends on the climate where they are, what they can teach. But there's a whole lot of committed faculty committed to teaching this work and doing this work, sometimes to their career peril. So if you're an untenured person, you might face more risk in teaching diversity, but many of my friends and colleagues do it anyway. So that was a long answer to a short question.
Thank you, Myrtle. That's very helpful, because that's one of the things I think about a lot. Like, as a faculty at UTA, we got almost every day about trainings and efforts on DEIJ, but like, what do they really look like, right? That's very helpful. Second question for you. So can you give your definition of each of the terms: diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and what they might look like in workplaces and organizations?
Okay, so I don't have a formal definition for justice. I think that I would say for that one, I would just have to fly off the seat of my pants and say people getting what they deserve. But other people might argue about what people deserve. But I believe people deserve to be treated well. People deserve to eat well, to be safe, to be warm, to have health care. So I think justice is really, really broad. And when we think in the United States, we think about our justice system, and that's right, laughable, right? Our justice system is anything but. So, when I think about what justice is, that's a hard one for me. The other ones, for diversity, I have a formal definition that I use: real or perceived differences among people that affect their outcomes, opportunities, interactions, and I said outcomes. And I talk about that broadly in terms of these are real or perceived differences in race, in sex, in age, in sexual orientation, in disability status. And I say real or perceived because race is not real. I don't know how many of you know that. Race is socially constructed. We constructed that to other, and I say we collectively, constructed that to other and treat people badly. But we're all the same biologically. We are the same. We just have different skin colors and different hair textures and different eye shapes and so on and so forth. But race is socially constructed. So I say real or perceived. But so even though it's socially constructed, it has very real outcomes for people. So we're all the same, but Black people get treated worse in public settings than non-Black people. So even though it's socially constructed, has very real outcomes. So real or perceived differences in race, sex, age, sexual orientation, and so on and so forth. So that's what I consider to be the definition of diversity. And so inclusion is, there's a formal definition of inclusion, but it's slipping my mind now. But inclusion is where people are there and they feel they belong. So in any setting, you could have diversity. And so like, if you're in a hospital setting, you have diversity among the employees. But we know who the doctors are, who the nurses are, who the orderlies are, who the certified nurse assistants are. So there's diversity, but the decision makers are more homogeneous. Inclusion is where everybody, regardless of their low-level position, feels their voice matters and everybody's heard. And so inclusion is beyond diversity. You can be diverse and not at all inclusive. You can be diverse and your marginalized people come in and out, you know, like a revolving door. You hire them and then they feel devalued and then they quit. Or you hire them and they are devalued and they get terminated. There's so much research on how marginalized people are treated differently in organizations. I think of just one study that came to my mind just now. If you're Black or Latino, and this was a large study that they looked at, if you're Black or Latino and are late in this one organization, you get penalized. Whereas if you're white and you're late, you're not penalized for it, not punished for it. And so, you know, when I think about that, that's because we have the stereotypes of Black people being late and Latinos being late. They're on siesta. And so they do it and they get penalized, even though the white people who did it didn't get penalized. There's another one that I was looking at earlier today, fascinating and troubling study that looked at, and this is reams of data, looked at employers that do drug testing. The ones that do drug testing before hire more Black men and fewer white women. And so they have the stereotype that these Black men are drug users, and when they test for it, they hire more Black men and fewer white women. Well, white women can't be drug users, but these are numbers that they looked at in the data. They looked at it, but it's a common stereotype of who's a drug user. It's a Black man. And so if you don't do the drug testing, you just have these stereotypes, and a Black man comes to apply for a job, he's liable to not get the job because you have these stereotypes that he's a drug user, and you might hire some white women who are drug users just because you think they're not. Very fascinating and troubling studies. And there are a whole lot of studies that look at things like this that we could use to inform us if we were willing to learn. And so the other one was equity you asked about. So equity, a lot of times people confuse equity with equality. And so equality means everybody gets the same thing. Equity means people get what they need. People get what they need. And so if we will perhaps try to understand that people need different things because of structural barriers that have made them not be able to access certain things. People need different things because the game is set up for people who are not like them, and we want to improve their opportunities. Then equity might mean certain people get more of things than other people get. There's a cartoon kind of thing that some of you may have seen. It went around, I don't want to say Facebook because I'm not on Facebook, social media last year, maybe the year before. And one of my colleagues used it, and she does a really good job in teaching about it. So it's folks are trying to watch a baseball game, and there's a tall person, a medium person, and a short person. And the tall person could see over the fence, but the medium person seeing through it, and the short person couldn't see a thing. And so they gave different well, I guess they all had a box. I'm not sure, but it wound up with the short person getting everybody's box. And so, or maybe the one in the middle had one and the short person had 2 or 3. The tall person didn't need any boxes. And so they use that as an example of equity. So this person needs 3 boxes, so they get them. This one needs 1. This one doesn't need any. And so that's a way of saying you get what you need to achieve the same outcomes. Everybody wants to see the ball game, and this is how they see the ball game. And when I saw that, I also thought, though, that we need to be really careful in implying that people are inadequate. So nobody would just look at somebody and say they're short, they're inadequate, but people do look at marginalized groups and say it's their own fault that they can't see over the fence. If they'd only studied harder, if they'd only worked harder, they wouldn't need any help seeing over the fence. And so that's something that we have to be really careful about when we're talking about equity, to not make it look like somebody's inadequate and it's their own fault, when in actuality, oftentimes it's systems that are set up to advantage certain people and disadvantage other people. So that's all, in answer to that one.
Thank you, Myrtle. I actually quickly found the cartoon that you mentioned. If you don't mind, I can quickly share my screen, everybody, because I think it's so much easier to look at it than, like thinking on the top of our head. Is this the cartoon that you're looking for? You're talking about? Yeah. And the other one I just want to briefly mention, because in our global training, if you've been a mentor before, in our mentor training, this is the graph that they use, right? Because the tree is tilted and we give them the same leather, but then there's no fruits here. Whereas you lift the leather a little bit, there's still very little of them because the tree is tilted. The nutrition goes different, doesn't go equally, right? But then justice look like we have to fix the system so that everybody got treated fair and equally and justly. So yeah, I thought this is very fascinating. I'm gonna stop sharing so we can see your lovely face. Third question, and this is coming from one of our members. So what is a best example or illustration of systemic racism to use when we are in a conversation with someone that does not accept that there's systemic racism?
Okay, that's another hard one. And I've been doing this work for so long that I have zero tolerance, which is a really bad thing, for people who don't want to hear truth, right? It's just, to me, just so plain and so obvious. And so I try not to get in conversations with people who won't accept that systemic racism exists. And so that's really, as a diversity scholar and one who does this, for me personally, to save myself, I have to try to avoid stuff like that. But in answer to your question, and I'm assuming that you all have these conversations with folks, when we think about systemic racism and what it is, it's these structural things like public policies and institutional practices and things like cultural representations and other norms that work to perpetuate group inequality. So when we think about cultural representations and how is that systemic racism? So we see images of beauty, and who are they? They're white women. They're white women with blonde hair. And so that affects people who are not white women with blonde hair. And so that's a small thing, unless you're trying to get a job in movies or you're trying to get a job as an anchor on television. Public policies that say schools are funded by property taxes. And so this is our norm. This is how it works. This is just how it works. And so what that means is the schools in the richer neighborhoods get more funding. The schools in the poorer neighborhoods do not. And this systematically advantages people from the expensive zip codes and disadvantages the people from the poor zip codes. And this is our norm. We think nothing of it. It's of course property taxes should fund schooling. Of course these rich neighborhoods should have more schooling. But who said that? And why did they say that? Who thought this up? And who was in the room when this was being thought up? And what were they thinking about in terms of advantaging people like them and continuing to disadvantage people who are not like them? And so, you know, a best example of systemic racism might be something like that, because that people will understand, wow, I never thought about school funding. There's a video, I guess it's actually a YMCA commercial that I will send it to you, Leah, and you can send it to them. It's a YMCA commercial and it says just one number, and it's zip codes. And so it might start with 75007, and then it might be 70007, and then it might be 70012 or something. And they show the different neighborhoods based on just one number, just one number. And the people who were raised in the privilege number look different than the people who were raised in the other number. And so people can understand it's accidents of birth that made us be born and live in a particular neighborhood. It's nothing that we had to do. You know, we like in the United States to talk about merit and how hard we work. No, that might be how hard your parents worked, or your grandparents or your great-grandparents. Has nothing to do with you, where you were born and where you were raised, whether you were raised in Highland Park or whether you were raised in West Oak Cliff. That has nothing to do with you. And so perhaps you might talk with people about things like that in terms of systemic racism.
Thank you, Myrtle. Yes, unfortunately, I think many of us have to deal with that type of situation somehow. And I understand your anger and kind of like lack of tolerance, because that's kind of me sometimes. But I'm still like trying to learn, you know, how to make connection across the bridge, two sides, and make bridges. So the next question, so given the long history of institutional racism, how do you balance the desire for cultural and industrial progress with the risk of additional harm to the BIPOC communities?
What do you mean by cultural and industrial progress? What do you mean by that?
So
I was
go
going
ahead.
to say, can you read the question a bit slowly? So I'm writing down the questions, or put it in the chat.
Sure. So the question is, given the long history of institutional racism, how do you balance the desire for cultural and industrial progress with the risk of additional harm to BIPOC communities? And here is, you know, from an environmental justice perspective, right now, you know, the push for electrifying our transportation system is pushing for the development of EV, right, electric vehicle. But a lot of the conversation, especially for organizations focusing on justice issue, the issue come from when we push for full electrification of transportation, we're looking at cleaning up the air. But at the same time, the battery needs, all the metals in the batteries usually come from poor communities and poor country in the global south. So in a way, if we're trying to push for EV development within the next 10 years, right? A lot of people argue we really don't have time to look for other resources, except for in those poor countries and poor community, we have to extract from or take advantage kind of from these community in order to improve our clean air and clean water. So I guess that's like the first example I think about. So how do we balance that industrial progress or that environmental progress, if we want to call it that way, without additional harms to the BIPOC community or poor community in the globally?
Okay, thank you for explaining that, Leah. So that's something that I have not thought about deeply or studied deeply, but just off the top of my head, I believe that we collectively are so greedy and money and profit driven that that's driving everything, and or most everything. So if we're talking about electric vehicles, we're not really trying to save the environment. We're really just trying to make more money collectively, not you, not me, but collectively. We're trying to make more money. And so we're not concerned about the BIPOC people. We're not concerned about the people in the global south and their water being contaminated and them getting sick. We don't care. And that really is the bottom line. We need to try to care about human beings and about the havoc that we wreak on people because we are greedy. And so it's just, it doesn't really answer your question about how we do it, except we need to try to get people to care. And it's just frightening to me how broadly greedy and callous we are about people's health. So I was watching that video of the young woman who, dealt with the pesticides. And I thought about, my mom tells me about her best friend, who was also named Myrtle. Her son, Myrtle, had a fiance, graduated from college, first in her family to graduate from college. She went to Southern University, which is a historically Black university in Baton Rouge. And she got a job in LA. This was in the early 70s, right after the Civil Rights Act and trying to hire Black folks. And so she got a job. She went to some agricultural manufacturer. She worked one day in a pesticide laden area, and she went home and died. She died that day, and we believe it's from exposure to pesticide. Now, it doesn't kill everybody right away. It kills you a long time, but this is still happening. This is still happening. We don't care collectively. One of my students sent me last week a text, and it was so troubling. And it was just so troubling. She's doing a paper on migrant farm workers. And the text said something like, here it is. I just saw this on Twitter. She said, Oregon will temporarily require shade and cool water for farm workers after a Guatemalan immigrant worker died in the 100-degree Fahrenheit plus heat. Farm workers are up to 35 times more likely to die from heat than other workers. At least half are undocumented, but no federal heat regulations protect them. Why is this? Because we don't care collectively. We don't care. They're just undocumented immigrants, and we want blueberries for $5 a pound. Oh, we want organic blueberries. Okay, so we'll pay $8 a pound. But we still don't care about these workers dying in the heat. We don't care. Our government doesn't care. And here we are. And so I don't know the answer to your question. I would like to see us care more about our fellow human beings. If we cared more about our fellow human beings, that would help more about in what we did to the environment. Sorry to not be better equipped to answer that.
No worries. It's a really hard question because Simon and I actually talk about this question for a long time ahead of time, and it's a really hard one for a lot of, especially environmental organizations, to balance out the message and balance out the practices and the campaigning, right? Like, how do we do that? The next question, and we have about maybe 13 minutes. The next question for you, Myrtle, is how do you define microaggression? I personally find this really hard to define because it just depends on where in my opinion, it depends on where the aggression is coming from and who is taking those comments and statement. But how do you define microaggression, and how should we call it out respectfully in workplaces and maybe educate others about it if it's our responsibility?
Okay, that's a good question. And I have a definition for microaggressions. And I've taught this so much, and I have just finished the 4th edition of my book. So these things are first and foremost on my mind. Brief, daily, commonplace, verbal, behavioral, slights or insults or environmental indignities that communicate hostile, derogatory, or other negative racial slights or insults. And so daily, commonplace, verbal, behavioral, or environmental. So you speak such good English. They consider that a racial microaggression. What, so you thought I wouldn't be able to speak English because I'm Black, because I'm Asian? Where are you really from? You think I'm not from Los Angeles. What do you mean by that? Yeah, and other kinds of daily environmental slights. So this was coined, actually, the original person who coined it didn't get much credit, but this is associated with an Asian professor who was traveling, and the flight attendant asked him and his colleague to move when some white business people got on the plane. They asked them to move to the back of the plane. And that is a behavioral slight. Why'd you ask me to move? Why did you ask me to move? And oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Of course you didn't, but I took something from that. What did you mean? Why did you single me out to move? And it happens a whole lot. I was at a baseball game a few weeks ago, and this man asked me, we were sitting in the handicap section, and he said, can I come over here and sit in these chairs? And I said, I don't know. You should probably ask the usher. I thought you were the usher. That is a microaggression. Do I look like an usher? Is it because I'm Black that you think I'm the usher? What is this? I didn't say anything to him. And I didn't say anything to him because I thought, he's 100 years old. He won't get it. Just leave him alone. He just needs a seat. And so how should we call it out respectfully in workplaces and educate others about it? I really believe this is one that I believe people need education on. And I think, and I have an article, I'll send this to you also, Leah. I think we need to say, boy, that was really unpleasant. Or why did you ask me that? Or that was really hurtful. Why did you ask where I'm really from? What makes you think I'm not from Los Angeles? What makes you think that? But I also feel like we also need to show grace and mercy to people, because sometimes people really are not trying to be rude or disgusting. And so if we can act like we want people to treat us, that's helpful. Even though we want people to help educate us so we don't do it again, we also need to be gracious and try to help people. And so when they say, I'm so sorry, but we don't want them to say, why are you so angry? We want them to say, I'm so sorry, please forgive me, help me to not do that again. My best friend for many years was a gay white male. And we had a lot of conversations about being Black in America. We were 6 months apart in age, and being gay and white in America. And so sometimes we can learn a lot from each other, and then so we don't engage in a microaggression on somebody else later. And so I think it's helpful if some of our friends can help us with some things that some stranger might not be willing to. They might just think we're an ignorant bigot. And so it might help us to expand our friend pool. But as we expand, show mercy to our friends and try to help them learn.
Thank you. It kind of reminds me of we have to care, not just caring about each other, but care about people who might not be aware of that's a microaggression, right?
Right.
Yes.
For sure.
Thank you.
And if we think about how little we learn cross-racially, it's no small wonder that we do things that are microaggressions. But if we want to do better, we have to be open to learn. We have to be open to learn and say, wow, I didn't know that, and I'm really sorry about that. And thank you for helping me to learn. and I'll never do that one again.
Absolutely. That actually answered one of our prepared questions. Yeah, sometimes and one of our community guideline is intent does not negate impact, right? That's kind of a really great example of that. Like people usually don't intend, and I will share a little bit of my personal experience. I spent so many years in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, there are not a lot of Asian people. So my husband and I, we will go to Costco and people at Costco will be like, oh, you two speak great English. And to me, as an international student, I first of all, at that time, I didn't understand microaggression. I thought, yeah, I'm an international student. It's normal to hear that. But for him, who was born and raised here, he was like, do I look like I'm not speaking English? Do I look like you have some kind of assumption to me? And so that's one of the things that we kind of try to stand in their shoes. They don't intend, it's not their intention that, oh, they're trying to discriminate us or putting aggression towards us. But at the same time, that's the impact. So intent does not negate impact. And we can always, apologize and having the attitude of being curious, being willing to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I have one more really important question. So what questions do you wish all allies would ask?
I wish allies, okay, and so allies, it's like privilege. So you can be an ally to a Muslim person, you can be an ally to a gay person, you can be an ally to anybody who's marginalized that's not in the group that you are in. And so this is broad. So I would wish allies would say, how can I help? How can I help? And mean that, what would you like for me to do? And so sometimes they don't want you to do anything. They just want you to listen and say, wow, that was really jacked up. I'm sorry that happened to you. So ask, how can I help? How can I help? And mean it. And when they tell you, you can help by doing so-and-so, then be willing to step out and do it. There's research on whites and dominant group members confronting bias. They're viewed as more credible than non-whites and non-dominant group members confronting bias. So if there's sexism, for example, and a man says, oh man, that is really sexist, you shouldn't be saying that. That's received a lot differently than a woman saying that. It's just like, oh, she just must be PMSing. Why is she so sensitive? But if a man says this is jacked up, you shouldn't be saying that, then another man will hear that more. Same with if a white person says, boy, that sounded really racist to me. It's heard more than if a Black person says it. And this is empirical, experimental research. So it's not like in an organization, but it's still really tight and validly done. And so when allies speak up, that can help. That can really, really help. So if you're straight and you speak up against somebody making some homophobic remark, or maybe not even homophobic, but just something that assumes that their partner is straight, something that, assumes that they would be comfortable putting their partner's picture on the desk. Why don't you bring so-and-so to the parties and can speak up about why this person might not? It means a lot more than the person in the group. And so I would say for those who are in positions of privilege, use that for good, but ask your people what they want you to do. Sometimes they don't want to, sometimes they expect backlash if you do something. So they want you to just hear them and not do anything.
Thank you, Myrtle. I do have one follow-up question because I think it's really important. So how do we balance, asking how can I help versus sometimes I will hear a lot of friends of color of mine, they would say, it's not our responsibility to educate how you can participate in the movement. You need to look up resources and do your homework of that. And sometimes I would have this inner voice yelling in the top of my head to my white friends as well. You need to read about this. Why should I be the one responsible to educate you on what's going on in Southeast Asia? Right? Like, how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a really good follow-up question. So my how can I help response is like, you're there, they told you this happened, and then you say, how can I help? But broadly, like when George Floyd's getting shot down in the street and white people are saying, I didn't know this was happening. Why didn't you know this was happening? It's been happening forever. Don't ask me to explain to you this. Get you some books and read up on racial profiling. It's a thing. It's been a thing forever. But I also feel like we should, but we don't, but we should have cross-racial relationships with people. And when we do, then we can speak with them about things. I told you about my gay white male friend. He told me some stuff about being gay and his experiences, and I told him some stuff about being Black and my experiences. And so we learn from each other. But we don't need to just say this to any colleague who happens to be the Black person or the Latino person or the Asian person down the hall when some more Asian people have gotten shot. We don't need to say, what should I do to learn about this? We need to act like this is a real problem and then engage ourselves. But at the same time, if someone who's a close friend says, what can I do to help? I don't want to be in so much pain that I can't tell them what you can do to help, right? So it's two. And I think that a lot of the resistance and anger from Black people with this George Floyd thing was, please don't tell me you didn't know this. Please don't tell me this, because I don't want to hear this. I don't want to hear this. But even as I say this, white people have been privileged to believe that the police are your friend, and Black people know better. Black people know better. I grew up in an all Black neighborhood, went to an all Black elementary, then I switched to an all white school. And there was a guy, I'll never forget him. I can see him right now. He was one of the really smart kids in class. He had a mental breakdown. Family called the police. They killed him. Don't ever call the police. They will come to your house and kill you if you are Black. And so Black people learn this. We know this. White people didn't have to know this. And so that's why so many white people were brokenhearted and devastated to see George Floyd get killed in the street, because they didn't know. We knew. And while I think they should have known, I can also understand that they didn't know. And they've been taught. Look for the helpers. We've all heard Mr. Rogers, look for the helpers. And we don't look for helpers in police as Black people, because it's dangerous for us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Myrtle. So I got a couple questions from our members here. So the first question is from Harley Smith. So how do we answer to the concern when we create a diverse group, but the outcome has not improved, within the short term or as soon as possible? So she gave an example in education. In her community, they created a diverse group of teachers, but the results are not seen with student performance of certain race group among those kids. How do we react or answer to those concerns?
Okay, that's a tough question, and it's really complex. So first thing I'd say is don't give up, but I would also say, look at why things haven't changed. Look at what set it up to be the differences, and would you even expect that to change in a year or 2 or 3, right? And so, and if I can just give you an example. So we created a diverse group, but we're looking for better graduation rates for underrepresented minority students. But if we think about what's driving the graduation rates, it's poverty, and creating a diverse teaching group doesn't change the poverty. It's sometimes they're hungry. That doesn't change their hunger. So what else can you do to fix the things that are driving these lower graduation rates, in addition to making the teachers diverse, which does help? There is research on this. Just having one Black teacher, I saw this fascinating study, in 3rd grade helps a Black male graduate from high school. Fascinating. for Latinos, having Latino administrators or teachers helps them persist in school. So I would say continue with those things, but also go back and look at some of the other things. I saw something in the paper the other day that said, I want to say it was Garland ISD, Independent School District. It might not have been Garland, but it was somebody like that, is going to provide meals for their students 12 months a year. Because kids are hungry, and it's mind-boggling, but kids are hungry. And so in the summer, they're hungry, so we're going to give them food throughout the year. And that kind of thing can help with graduation rates and persistence and that kind of thing. So I don't know what the issues you were concerned about, but those are often things that people are concerned about in school systems.
Thank you, Myrtle. And I think that resonates or relates a lot to what we're doing in terms of moving the climate policy forward. A lot of the times we're thinking, why can't we get more people of color joining our fight? First of all, there are a lot of them on the ground doing the fight. But at the same time, the reason might be they're dealing with poverty, they're dealing with hunger. They don't have the resources in order to feed their kids so that they have extra time and resources to worry about anything other than the next meal, right? So like planning for the long term and continue working on that without just giving up. Well, thank you so much, Myrtle. We're at time. I know there are a couple more questions, but Myrtle, if you can give if you're willing to share your email in the chat, people can also, hopefully you'll take questions via email, but we're so happy and so honored to have you here. And we will work, within our own organization and hopefully to, this is a work in progress. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
My pleasure. It was an honor to do it. And thank you for the work that you're doing. And yes, you can email me if you like.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Myrtle.
All right.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Bell.
Back to you.
All right, man. I wish we had more time. We're going to go to announcements now. Dan, are you there? Dan Green has some information about an upcoming workshop coalition.
I am here. Can you hear me? Good. So just had a couple of quick announcements. As you may know, we're having a meeting of the Texas Louisiana chapters, and we have a date set for that now. It's November 6th, 7th. It's going to be in the afternoons, 2 to 6, 2 4-hour sessions. We've been planning on that for a little while now and kind of nailed down the agenda finally and what it's going to look like. So the reason I'm bringing this up now is I'm going to need to reach out to a few groups for support here. We're kind of at that state. I'm going to be reaching out to the leaders of the legislative, the plastics, the business, and environmental justice type groups. That would be the Southside Coalition and the Latinx groups and maybe some others for helping to run. We're going to have breakout sessions in those meetings, working group sessions, I should say, that'll be broken out with like-thinking members from each of the coalition groups. That'll be Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and New Orleans. So we're going to have all of those chapters participating, and we're going to have working group sessions with members from each of those. So I'm going to be reaching out in the next month to the leaders of those groups, looking for some folks to help be the moderators and leaders of those groups. And the other chapters will be doing the same. So hopefully what we'll have is 4 or 5 people, one from each chapter, that are helping run those working group sessions. The other thing we'll have there is presentations from all the city groups. And so that's another thing. I'll also need some IT support. And I was talking to Jeff about that briefly, to design a registration form that has some choices for folks to be in which group they want to participate in. So we need to get that going too, probably in the next month or so. The other thing is, switching gears here, we got a workshop coming up this Wednesday night, and I need a link sent out from Leah, probably you. I guess you're going to send the link to the chapter members that we're going to be talking about climate denial and how to work with it, how to deal with it, how to approach it. So that's going to be Wednesday night at 7 p.m. This coming Wednesday at 7 p.m. I think that's the 21st. 7 p.m. And we're going to have a workshop discussion on that. So hopefully, Betsy, if you're new to the group and you're freshly trained and all of a sudden you've got all this great information and you start telling your friends and relatives about it and you meet all this, oh my goodness, resistance, just some simple tools and tricks to help further that discussion. So we'll be talking about that. So those are my announcements. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dan. I've been told I have an echo. I'm sorry. I'll try to minimize talking. Next up, we have Ishrita with a notification about our youth group.
Hi guys. So sorry, I don't have my camera on. I'm actually out right now. But yeah, I just had some stuff to talk about for the youth group. So regarding our podcast. So we have about 3 episodes out right now. Go check it out. They're called, the podcast is called The Green Paths, and it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever you listen to. But so far in our experience, it's been really hard to, produce such long episodes. We have 30 to 40 minute episodes because we're interviewing guests from different places, and it's just a really long process to produce an episode, edit it, and get it out. So to make that more consistent, we were wondering if we could have some help from people in the chapter. So one idea that I had to help us start putting out episodes more frequently was to have any of you guys send about a 10-minute video or a 10-minute audio recording talking about, anything related to your career that has to do with climate or some kind of journey or some kind of interesting experience that you have. Most of our episodes, or all of our episodes so far, have been in an interview format where we have either me or Vanessa talking to a guest, but this would be just you guys talking for 10 minutes or so about a cool experience or journey that you had. And we would edit that down or something and make that into an episode. We might compile multiple of your audio recordings into an episode. But yeah, it would just help us because our team's really small right now and we don't have, we're just not able to get them out as fast as we want to. So it would help us out a little bit from the chapter if you guys could do that. So that would be really great. And if you can, just send it to me in my email. I'll drop it in the chat as well.
Shrita. Next over, we have Karen Dyer with an update on new members.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I just wanted to introduce a few people that are on the call today that are new members of the chapter. First up, Jeffrey Pullis, who I think is still on. Oh, hi, Jeff. Would you like to say hello to the group and tell us what brought you to Climate Reality? You have to take yourself off mute.
Yes. Hello, I am Jeffrey Pulis. I've had a long-term interest in and participation in social justice issues, and environmental justice is one that's kind of leapt into the forefront of my mind recently. My friend Patricio Gallo, I was talking to him about it, and he's a member, and he suggested that I get in touch and join this group, and so I did, and here I am.
Welcome. We're very, very glad to have you, Jeffrey. Thank you. And we also have Madeline Lee, who joined the chapter in late May. Hi, Madeline. Would you like to say hello?
Yes, I'm Madeline. I learned about the chapter in late May. I haven't been officially trained yet, but I had been thinking for a while. I had known climate change was a problem, but up until then, I wasn't really that involved. But at that point, I just felt like that instead of just thinking that someday I'll do something, I should just get started. So even though I don't really know what I'm doing, I just found the Climate Reality Project and wanted to sign up. And I've been attending meetings since then, and I hope to get trained in October. But it's a pleasure to meet you all.
It's great to meet you, and it's wonderful to have you. Okay, there is a Catherine on the call, and I didn't get a last name, but I think it might be Catherine Walsh.
That's me. Hi, y'all. Nice to meet you. Here, let me turn my camera on. I've just been trying to get more involved, and I went to a recycling training with the city of Plano, and some of the women on the call were part of this program, and I thought, what a great idea. So I'm excited to join y'all.
Hey, I think that was me who saw you at the Plano recycling thing. Welcome.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I didn't remember your name, so I was like, I don't even know.
All
if
good.
she's
Yeah,
here.
this is Alex.
Oh,
Nice to meet you again.
Jessica was there too.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. Hey.
Well, welcome, Catherine. We're so glad to have you. And then we also have Dominique, who's on the call, who joined the chapter in May. So would you like to introduce yourself? Let's see if she's still on. She might have dropped off.
I think we lost Dominique.
Yeah, I think we lost her. Okay. And that's everyone, I think. Or is there anyone that I didn't mention? And if I didn't, I apologize. Anyone else like to speak up, being new?
Hi, this is Christy Macklin. I'm sorry I jumped on late for the presentation, but I was trained in, I guess that was April, May, for the climate reality leaders program, and that's how I joined the chapter. And I am formerly a environmental scientist, so I've done that my whole career. I received my master's from LSU, and now I do community outreach and engagement for my agency. I work for the federal government, and actually kind of educating the public on environmental and noise issues for my agency. So that's kind of a lifelong climate and environmental person. So that's it. Thanks, guys.
Oh, Christy, welcome. We're so excited to have you. Thank you so much. And we look forward to working with all of you. Okay, thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everybody who is new. And related to that, we have elections coming up soon for the executive committee. I've heard some talk that people in the chapter believe that the executive committee is responsible for kind of driving our initiatives. And that's really not what we do actually at all. And to illustrate how we actually work, I wanted to present this to you. And actually, my computer just closed the item I needed. So give me 1 second. Okay, here we go. So this is actually our model. The executive committee does not make decisions. We are not on top of anything. We surround every one of you, and we work to enable you on whatever initiatives you want to do. If you have an idea for something that we're not doing, let us know, and all of us are going to pull together to find a way to help you do that. That is it. That's the whole thing right there. We're not in charge of anything. We're not really like making policies. There are some higher level stuff that we deal with, some like bird's eye view of stuff, but we are here to support you. That is it. That is the extent of everything we're doing. So even if you are new, and especially if you are new, please consider running for a position. Also, we need an elections administrator. We need somebody, even if you're not thinking about running for a position, we need somebody to keep track of who the nominees are, votes, etc. Please consider filling a position, being the elections administrator, even if you're new, even if you're not trained. That is totally cool. We get great ideas from new people. I mean, this is my first year with the chapter, and I was roped into the executive committee. So it's okay. It's totally cool. Roger, did you have anything to add on this topic?
Yes, nominations will open in September. So if you're not fully aware of what the duties of any of these positions might be, you can find them on our website. The current members of the executive committee are all listed there, and under the who we are, and then under chapter leadership, you'll find the executive committee. Each person's duties or responsibilities are listed. So educate yourself about what's available, and consider putting your name in nomination in September. We will begin our elections in October. The results are announced at the November meeting, and the new executive committee will come on board and get busy focusing on strategic plan for next year. So I'll second what Simon said. Even if you're brand new to the chapter, don't shy away from considering being in one of these positions. The people who founded the chapter, I can say with certainty, knew absolutely nothing about running a chapter when we started this process. We're coming up on our fourth anniversary next month. That's a terrific achievement. Lots of chapters come into existence and go out of existence. I think that we're thriving, but we're thriving because consistently people, including new people, have been willing to step up with fresh perspectives. And most importantly, we'll be looking for someone to run for vice chair. The model we've now created says that when you become vice chair, you agree to then move into the chair's position the following year. So Simon and Leah will be sharing the duties of chair next year. We'll need someone in the vice chair position, very important. So please consider stepping up. From there, Simon, I guess, are we ready to move to the self-care group?
Yes, we are.
I'm aware, I appreciate people staying on. It's already 2:34 and we're trying very hard to be done by 2:30. So I'll be very quick. First, an announcement. One of the things that the self-care group offers to the chapter is what's called a listening circle every other month. Normally that's the fourth Saturday of the month, but we're moving it this month from the 24th to the 31st. It's going to be held at Mark Dambro's home, and that's west of Fort Worth. So this is one more step in an initiative we started last year before the pandemic, before we got stuck with nothing but Zoom, to start moving our events and our meetings around the metropolitan area so that we don't stay quite so Dallas-centric. If you're interested in participating, this is not an event just for the self-care group. This is something we're doing for people in the chapter. I will say that Maria Solomon is a very gifted leader of the process that she calls a listening circle. It's a terrific way to get to know other people, and it's an in-person meeting. I've heard many of you say, I've been seeing you on a screen for a year and we still haven't met. Come on the 31st to the listening circle. You can participate as much or as little as you choose, but it's a great experience. I think that it's imperative in an all volunteer group that we all be doing things to take care of ourselves so that we can stay committed and stay active for the long haul. And that's what the self-care group is trying to promote. So come to that group. I'm going to turn it over to Jim Notman in about 1 second, but I have two additional things to say very quickly. One of the other things that you've heard me talk about kind of endlessly is recording acts of leadership. We have bragged, and we got a fair amount of praise from chapter support last year because this chapter recorded 1,300 acts of leadership. That's a big number for a chapter to put up. Paula Day is keeping track of our acts of leadership this year. We get a weekly update. We know who's doing it. We're keeping track of all of you. We have already put up 1,300 in the first 6 months. Folks, applause, pat yourself on the back. We are taking action. And I have to tell you, a huge percentage of those is in the category of contacting influencers. That means emails and calls to people in elected office, our elected representatives, or it means directors of federal agencies, or it means people in city government or state organizations, people with power. That's what Climate Reality is calling for. We're doing that. So bravo to people in this group. Now, the other thing that I do want to say, and it goes along with the elections coming up this fall, I have said for a long time that chapters are either changing, and that means new people coming into positions, or they're going moribund. We have seen chapters get founded and then fold their just close their doors and go out of business. It happens more than we want to admit. To keep this chapter moving forward, we've got to take care of ourselves, and you've got to step up. So it's really terrific that that we're putting up all these numbers, but I want to see this continue for this year. One sign of real vitality to me in an organization is that new ideas keep coming up. And Jim Notman approached me not long ago. It's a kind of spin-off from the self-care group, but he has an idea for a whole new group that he's launching. And from there, I'll turn it over to Jim for a description of this new initiative that he wants to lead.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I've been part of Climate Reality a little over a year now. And one thing, when you do the training, and I wasn't part of the chapter before that, so kind of jumped in with both feet, not knowing exactly what I was getting involved in. But you do that training, and what's the one thing that they tell you a lot of, be prepared for your 10 presentations. You're going to give 10 presentations, make your deck, that's reinforced over and over and over through the training. And then you get to the chapter, and, people like Roger and others, say, especially this year, we want you to contact your representatives. We want you to, put your senator on speed dial. Well, for somebody like me, that's really more of an introvert, calling somebody cold is not fun. It's not my idea of the activism that I want to do. And in all honesty, I wasn't an activist prior to this. I mean, it's definitely interested, but not as a general rule. I wouldn't have called myself an activist. So within that idea, I've been kind of thinking to myself, okay, how do you be an activist and be an introvert? They sound kind of oxymoronic. They don't necessarily go together, at least at face value. And so I reached out to Roger, kind of say, I got some ideas. We don't want to say, you introverts, you go in the back room, lick the stamps, stuff the envelopes, and put it out there because, you're too afraid to go talk to people. And that's painting with a very broad brush, And so ironically, I bring this up to Roger, and I'm going to expose his secret, but he says, I get what you're saying. He is also an introvert. Probably most of you wouldn't believe that, right? And some of you probably wouldn't believe that I am, because I get on some of our group discussions and I won't shut up, So the point is to say that the idea of being an introvert may sound counter to activism, but it's not at all. And the idea is to say, okay, for anybody else that says, yeah, I'm more of an introvert type, how can I be more engaged? What are the things that I can do to be more part of this organization? And I think the breadth of this chapter, I think, offers more so than just, what you learn in training. And so, like I said, I talked to him about, hey, I wouldn't mind leading a discussion on that, or, seeing who's interested. So that's where we're at. An initial email went out. Actually, we have to reschedule a call that we had planned. But we're just it's not formal. Roger's got a degree in this, in psychology. I'm just an interested, introvert that wants to kind of see if other people have ideas, and more so than anything, not so much to change you or anything like that, more so to challenge you and to share our ideas. How can we do this? How can we be more engaged in our own ways, in our own creative ways? So I'm going to leave it at that. And if you want, I'll put my email in the, or Leah, can you do me a favor? Because typing and talking is not a good skill set that I have. So if you would drop my email, if anybody's interested, send me an email, just say, yeah, I'm interested in that. And I'll include you on the invite. Going to the idea of self-care, that's the, that's my commercial, for what we're trying to accomplish here. On the idea of self-care, I would say if you are an introvert, come on in, see what you can do to either bring to help others, with ideas that you have, or come in and see what we all can do to help each other as well. If you're one of those strange extroverted kind of people, I want to, at least tell you, realize, it's funny when you bring up introvert, extrovert. Some people get offended. Some people don't believe it, sort of thing. But I would say, the biggest thing is, being an introvert is not a condition, let's call it, I mean, it's just part of your personality, but also realize that introverts, even though they don't talk a lot, they got a lot going on in their head all the time. And so they're very good at connecting dots that you don't necessarily see and bringing some creative ideas to the situation. So I would offer that just to looking into the introvert head a little bit. And I will admit that the idea of a Zoom call of a bunch of introverts sounds kind of not like the biggest party in the world, but we'll give it a shot and we'll try to help each other out. Okay, so that's my commercial. Like I said, please email me if you're interested. I think it'll be a fairly casual environment, but definitely supporting and trying to help everybody figure out a better way to get involved. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Tim. All right, that is our schedule. I really appreciate that everybody hung on, even though we're 14 minutes over now. Thank you all. Please run for position. Please think about that. And that adjourns our meeting. Thank you all for coming.
Bye, guys.